How's everybody doing? It's going to be a miracle if my voice makes it through this. So we're going to go mic for sure here. How's Valkyrie? So if you want to take CS160 again, she'll be teaching it this summer. If you have to take CS160 again, that's a whole different thing. All right, am I mic'd? Are we good? So I'm back. Hi. I was in Austin for South by Southwest running the trade show floor for Kenoma. It's a thing. If you've never done it, you should not. Don't do that. I enjoy it because it's my product and I enjoy talking about my product and I enjoy talking to people, but it is like 16 hours a day of pitching for like 5 days in a row. And so my energy levels will come and go over the course of this lecture, so bear with me. Basically what we're doing today is two things. That's going to happen today, apparently. We're just going to roll with it. So two things. One, I'm going to, towards the second half of the lecture, just kind of give you my quickly assembled on the plane last night at 2 in the morning report on South by Southwest, kind of things I saw that were interesting and that fit into the theme of this class. The first half of this, though, is going to be about engineering user interface components, basically. So there was a question on the midterm that was like, why asynchronous? And you guys sucked on that question. And so I decided that maybe it was time we dig back into the actual engineering aspects of this a little bit. We're not going to go super deep on this, but we'll touch on it, from a high level and see what we can learn. So there you go. We're going to start up with interactive application programming, just kind of conceptually, what are we talking about? Why are we doing this? In the beginning, this is kind of what interaction looked like with a computer. Before that, if we take one step further back, we're talking about kind of mainframes and applications that were written once and then just go, right? And if you want to change the inputs to them, you literally pull out the punch cards and change the values, and then you can run again. The next step in that was talking about text entry. So going to something like this with a command prompt, and you could write actual kind of interactive applications. And these, it turns out, were really easy to write from a UI perspective because all you do is kind of prompt people for information and then act on that information and then go. And so you're in this kind of top to bottom, run through, get the information that you need and go sort of style of development. Then the 70s happened and the Alto came out, and suddenly we started talking about mice and cursors and clicking and keyboards and interaction with lots of different places in the window all at once. And suddenly dealing with input really became quite a lot harder. The input could occur at any time, it could be anywhere, it could be to any component. It wasn't just to this one fixed point, in the entire user interface where everything was coming into. And so what we ended up doing was moving towards event-driven UIs in the 70s, 80s, 90s today, where instead of interaction being controlled by the system and the system asking you for exactly what it wanted at exactly the time it wanted it, instead we were doing this event-driven thing, things like graphical user interfaces, where the interaction is controlled by the user and the system has to wait for the user and react to the user. Wildly, wildly more complicated to program and to architect. But it's what we had to do because it was just where the world was going. So in the old days, on the command line, this is kind of the general idea of what the pseudocode for a program looks like. You do some work, you ask the user for input, you wait for the user input, probably not doing anything in the background, you're just waiting. You process the user input, you do some work. Here's how you do that in, for instance, Java. By the way, today we're going to jump all over the place in terms of what UI toolkits I'm talking about. I didn't want to make this like a totally Canoma.js lecture. So there's some like Java, there's some Android, there's some Objective-C, there's some Canoma.js, there's all over the place. Anyway, this is kind of what that console program would look like in Java. If you want to make that interactive, make it so that you're kind of, it's a program that keeps running. It's not just the like hello world from the command line. Then probably you're doing some sort of big loop. You do some loop, you wait for user input, you process that user input, and then maybe you update the display. But displays weren't so cool at the time, so maybe you didn't bother updating the display. And that kind of do stuff slowly started building out to like, let's have an input command and we'll have, you know, some switch case thing. And every time we go through this loop, the user can decide what they want to do and we'll take action on it. What's a like canonical example? Does anybody have a good example of like this loop applications that are famous for the like wait for input, take action on that input, update the display, command line things? There's one like canonical example. It's text-based adventure sort of games kind of really follow this model of like, I'm going to wait for some fixed set of commands. I'm going to listen to those commands, and then I'm going to go out and do it. Maybe instead of IPA3, I'll make you all like just go play adventure for 12 hours or whatever.
Yes.
We're not going to do that. Okay. When the speaker decides to do that, it's our time to pause. Let Andy's voice recover. All right, so this doesn't work. This like, you're testing me this part of the floor. Somebody go down to 2. Yeah, I mean, somebody tell me if like I'm in mortal danger. If you see like a saw coming up through there, like somebody give a shout. All right, so you can't do this like just wait for input in some big loop thing on Windows systems because what you want to do in your application really depends on like what the user is clicking on, what the user has focused, you know, what the user is actually actively interacting with. And there's just too many of these combinations for like input times target window and windows everywhere to do this in one global big loop thing. So we have to come up with some way to kind of encapsulate code and data for each of these screen elements in order to make sense of it in a reasonable way. And this is really playing into, there was a question on the midterm that was like, what does Andy get angry about? And like 3 of you said everything. These guys are testing me today. We may find out that I do in fact get angry about everything. Anyway, we call these things that are kind of like bundled together code and display for a piece of interaction with the user interface, a widget. And GUI toolkits came out in the 90s-ish. Early 90s in the like Visual Basic awesome days. And they were, what the hell? That's just not just me, right? Everybody's hearing that. It's probably somebody telling us that the webinar isn't working, whatever. So in the 90s, Swing came out and kind of defined this space. But even before that, there were lots of different kind of Visual Basic toolkits for like drag and drop widgets. And those were used for building user interfaces. And the idea is that you have some selection of like sliders and checkboxes and whatever else that you can use in your thing, and that both have a display associated with them and some code to like implement the behavior behind that display. And so these toolkits, 1, give you these handfuls of widgets, and 2, define some sort of architecture for how you handle input and output, how you like make a program and what like the event loop looks like, how events get dispatched, and then how to like contribute new libraries or new widgets into the library, I should say. So what are some examples of widgets? I named a few. Give me a few more. Button sliders. Calendars. Oh dear, this is going to be fun today. Sidebars, scroll bars, toolbars, menus, dialogues, all sorts of things like that. And just to give you an example of what we're talking about, you get these kits that come with different SDKs. Who who's like a good murderer? Who wants to go like murder whoever that is? Go, Jonathan, go. Oh, he's on it. Probably. So, you know, I didn't mean it literally. It's like the rapper excuse. Like, I'm just a personality up here. I didn't expect anybody to take that too literally. All right, so widgets. Android widgets look kind of like this, or did a couple years ago. Actually, it depends what skin you're using. Sometimes they still look like this. We should note here that kind of we're using widget in the like UX sense of the word widget, not in the Android sense of the word widget, which is like a home screen thingy. We're talking about like widget libraries like this. So anyway, you got checkboxes and toggle switches and buttons and lists and very fancy. iOS 7 widget palette looks like this. Same sort of deal where you have like just slightly more apply versions of those widgets. That should make you shudder just a little bit, that swing. If you took 61B in Java, you probably had to do some of this nonsense where you were kind of building user interfaces up out of swing. An interesting thing to note here is that if we compare these two things, like Android and Swing, like this is all Java, right? There's nothing inherent to the language about widgets. It's that different application frameworks or different GUI toolkits can exist on top of the language, and then you implement, you know, whatever it is you've got on top of that. Windows 8, fancy, fancy. Very flat. You can see the move towards flat design over the years as you look at these. Compare that to the Windows 7 widgets, which were much more like rounded and not quite skeuomorphic, but definitely like more 3D. And then Cocoa is the last one we're going to look at here. So this is the like OS X widget library. And again, they're kind of torn between the like rounded shaded things and the flat things, and that's been moving back and forth over the past couple of years. Yeah.
Why is the user interface moving towards flat design?
It's just in. It's just in right now. It works pretty well on mobile, and so the expectations are coming from mobile towards this flat design thing. And I think part of what it is that you don't quite as much need the like visual cues of what's clickable anymore, because basically everything is clickable. And so people are moving away a little bit from the like 3D signifiers for clickability. But other than that, it's just hip. Like in 5 years, skeuomorphism will come back and we'll do the whole thing again. All right, so as I said, widgets are encapsulations and organizations of interactive controls. And usually they are derived from some top-level component class that knows things about like on mouse down, on mouse up, on click, things like that. So in Canoma.js, that's the content, you know, super object that like has a behavior inherent to it that knows about clicking and tapping and dragging and things like that. Did you just go get beef jerky?
No, I can find the source.
Yeah.
I want this down, I want up.
We're good. All right, and so each of these widgets gets drawn using the like whatever the underlying 2D like framework is for doing graphics drawing. In Canoma.js, it's port. In Java, it's Java 2D. And then they also wrap input processing, so mice and keyboard and touch. And they do all the bounds management. So layout management is like a big deal. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through here. So when you're doing a UI, each component ends up being a bounding box with some method for drawing itself. That could be like a literal like pixel for pixel thing, like on draw with like an HTML5 canvas, or it could be some aggregation of like lower level components or JPEGs or whatever it is to put things together, and then callbacks to process those input events. We should talk briefly, I suppose, about the 2D graphics model. So usually all you need to know about your 2D graphics model is whether 0, 0 is in the top left or the bottom left or the bottom right. Those are all valid possibilities. Usually it's in the top left. And then different people get weird about what the unit is for drawing coordinate spaces. In Canoma.js, we use pixels. In Android, they use pixels. Some people like using like ems and inches and centimeters. It depends kind of on what the final like goal for your thing is. If you're going to print, people always use ems. If you're going to the screen, people use pixels. It is what it is. And then there's some very bottom of the stack like rendering methods. And so I'll go with the Canoma.js ones. They are draw a rectangle, draw a line, draw some text, draw a JPEG, draw any bitmap. And that's pretty typical. Canoma.js does not have draw a circle. Some people do. We don't believe in circles. All right, and then the last bit of kind of what a widget library does for you is the sizing and layout thing. So components need to work at multiple sizes, and usually there's some kind of global layout manager that's deciding who gets to go where. The component itself doesn't necessarily get to make that decision. And so you may need to know when you've been resized. And so in Android, you get this view.onSizeChange thing. In Canoma.js, you get whatever your application behavior is, gets a callback called onAdapt. Always there's some way to know, like you've been rotated or you've been flipped or you've been resized for one reason or another. Make sense? So one high-level thing on widgets, we just walked through widget libraries. Widget libraries are kind of sort of going away. So widget libraries are super helpful for prototyping. They're all about like building things quickly, fast, strapping things together so that you can see how your thing works. They are not anymore used so much for production things. So if you like open up an Android app and like everything in the Android app is using the standard Android widget library, you're like, oh, somebody in college made this. Like it's just not commonly done at this point. And so to use the Canoma.js example, we have built-in widgets for like buttons and sliders and toggles and things, but those are never, ever used by like our professional customers. Like that's not the point. They're there to like quickly slap things together as prototypes. But when people really want to like build UIs at this point, they're always doing their own. It's relatively rare for, especially like people in the kind of cooler end of the mobile space to use built-in for much. What it is. Let's talk a little bit more about kind of layout and how we actually build these things. So how do you go about composing this user interface? We've got a UI with like a label and some text and some buttons. How do we tell the computer that we want this thing to screen like that? Yeah. Okay, so there's some layout that what's kind of the classic answer to the question from before most of your times. Used to be that everything was done absolute. So you would just always specify at XY 0, 0, it's going to be 350 high or wide and 20 high. Here, and this one's going to be here. So if you ever used like the older Visual Basics for doing like Windows 3.1, Windows building, it all worked like this. There were no layout managers. It was all absolute positioning. And the main reason that it was kind of okay is that everybody had really small monitors and everybody usually maximized their thing. And so usually you could either just pick a size for the window and it would be okay, or you could let the window do like horrible things with white space in the middle when you made it really big. But at the end of the day, it would usually just kind of work out. You're absolutely out like things with more where they should be. But anymore, you basically just can't do this anymore because you rotate your phone and because every Android phone in the world has like a different screen resolution and different people are using different types of devices and your thing might be run on a tablet in addition to a phone. You really have to, at this point, do more dynamic things with your layout. So absolute layout, the problem is it's inflexible, it doesn't scale or resize well, and basically nobody uses it for anything anymore. What we do instead is we have containment hierarchies. So we say that there's going to be this window thing, and inside the window thing there's a panel, and the panel has a label and a text area and another panel, and the panel has a couple of buttons. And then some layout manager deals with how to space those things out. within the context of each other. But the point is that the parent allocates space for its children, and then the children don't get to kind of decide on their own how big they're going to be or exactly where they're going to be. They get placed by their parent, and so on all the way up the hierarchy until you get to like the operating system level. There are two kind of different philosophies on how you manage that. So like in Swing, for instance, everything is just kind of a container, and then you attach a layout manager to that container. And the layout manager has some rules for kind of where it places things. The other way to do it is the way that GNOME.js does it, which is to have different types of containers that have their own inherent layouts. So like a column and a line in GNOME.js have their own built-in layout managing mechanisms. So you end up with this sort of thing where the window picks its space, the panel picks its space, this panel picks its space, and everybody is kind of responsible for allocating their own, little children's into the right places on the screen. So that's cool. There are many different kind of common hierarchical layouts, 1D horizontal or vertical lists, very popular. This is dominating in the mobile space at this point. Most people do things using list up and list across, which is what column and line are in GNOME.js. 2D grids were super popular in Swing, but are kind of fading as HTML tables faded. And then if you're really cool, there's all these things on constraint-based layouts, things like struts and springs. So if you've ever seen a UI where you start it up and everything just kind of bounces for a second, this is often used in browsing family trees or tag clouds or different information visualizations more so than straight UIs. But that's where things are constraint-based and they kind of sort out their own place. Using simulated annealing or some other fancy technique. That's what happens when computer science theory people try to make user interfaces. There should be more math in this UI. That's that. So, any questions on layout, widgets, that sort of thing? It's pretty exciting, come on. Cool. All right, so next we're going to talk about events and the event subsystem and how do you actually know when people are clicking and what they're doing. So broadly, the idea of an event is that user input is modeled as an event that must be handled by the system and applications. Give me some events. Touch, sure. Keystroke. Okay, click. Okay, on start, on launch, things like that. What's that?
Hover.
Yeah, so hover, depending on your fancy state diagram for input, whether you have that input state. So, what's that?
Dictate.
Okay.
Possibly turning power off or turn it off.
Yeah, I think most Android phones let when they turn the screen off. Yeah, so those are kind of the most direct ones. So things like mouse input, mouse enter, that's the hover stuff. There are inferred events like double click that are really just two events that the operating system bundles up into one for you. Keyboard movement, resizing, sensor inputs, things like that all get kind of bundled up into events. And then you encapsulate the whole thing into some data structure that then gets sent to a handler and the handler reacts to the input. So typically in these sorts of things, you would put the event type, source, the timestamp, modifiers, the context, everything that the component might reasonably need to know to then take a reasonable action upon that thing. And so what we're getting into here is that now the way that systems really work is instead of you writing some, system dot, all right, if I'm going to Java this, writing a main function in your class somewhere, instead of having main, what you really have is an event dispatch loop that is constantly running in the background and is waiting for user input and addressing the right part of the application once those inputs come in. So the event loop has its own dedicated thread, usually. It listens for these sort of mouse moved whatever events. It gets pushed onto a queue and then popped out onto the event loop. And then the event loop has to decide, all right, what do I do with this thing? Who do I send it to? How do I find that? There's a mechanism. It's basically just look down the stack and see who's on top at this particular XY coordinate, and then find the right callback for that component and then send it to it. And then just wait or repeat or loop or whatever it is, waiting for the next thing to happen. And then when the component gets its thing, it has to decide whether it wants to deal with it or not. It has to update the application state, and then it usually has to redraw itself or ask somebody else to redraw itself. And so this is important just in the sense that like you really need to know that this is what's going on behind the scenes in order to build reasonable user interfaces. Like if you don't get that like doing something out here in like non-event loop land that's going to freeze everything is bad, that's bad. And if you don't realize that like this has to be really fast, you could end up building a really crappy system. So we're trying to avoid building really crappy systems. That's the main goal of this. So how do you actually decide where to send the thing? You use hit testing for mouse and touch events. Usually you send it to like the topmost thing in the stack. Most application frameworks have some way to state whether or not you're interested in listening to a particular type of event. So in Canoa.js, it's active equals true or active equals false, decides whether or not you're going to get those touch events. And then keyboard events usually go to whatever component has the key focus. And there's lots of different ways to determine that. In Canoa.js, you explicitly set it, but different frameworks have different ways of doing that. Can you imagine any exceptions to these rules? So when would a mouse or touch event not go to like the topmost active thing in the stack? Yeah. Yeah, it's wacky, isn't it? I can't decide whether that's right or not. But yeah, so like if you do the mouse wheel scroll and you're hovering over a window that's not the active window, you can usually scroll that background window. So that's an example of like it's the one that's being hit detected, but it's not in any way the like active one. How about a place where like the component that is being hit detected doesn't get the event? There's a classic example of that, which is that say you have a button here and you tap down on it and then you drag off of it and then you let go. So mouse down, drag, mouse up. Usually your mouse up event goes back to this component instead of like whatever you're hovering over now. But different frameworks handle that in different ways. And then there are other ways that like keyboard events can go off to an unexpected place. So for instance, if you're on your Windows laptop and you Alt-Tab, that doesn't end up going to the application. It gets caught by Windows, and Windows switches between applications using it. So anything that kind of changes focus will not follow these rules exactly. And the like canonical classic example of that is tab. So like entering a tab into a text box, very difficult because tab gets caught higher up in the system and uses it to like move between the boxes, right? And so if you wanted to like build an application where you were actually capturing tabs, you would have to make some fundamental change to like your application framework. You can't just kind of do it straight off the bat. So there's that. Events can be abstracted in different ways. So you could imagine like, mouse down or click or double click or drag. You could imagine touch moved versus gesture. And usually these are built into application frameworks at different levels. So you usually can get all of them. So in Canoa.js, for instance, you can get mouse touch down, and you can get touch moved, and you can get touch up. Or if you hook into like a slightly different subsystem, you can get the gesture, you can get the like went left, went right. It all depends on just kind of how the different components and their behaviors are built up to handle the kind of atomic fundamental events. And then those events have to go somewhere. So you can imagine them going to a onTouchEnded function that takes the container and an ID of what finger it was and the XY location. And how long it was since the finger went down. And that goes to some function, and you decide what to do with it, and you're like writing a program. Very exciting. Detecting gestures is done in the same sort of way, and it's an interesting problem, actually, where there's two kind of fundamental types of gestures. There's a continuous manipulation gesture, which is where you like pinch and zoom or like drag. And then there are things that are stroke recognition gestures. So when you're like putting in handwriting or you're using swipe on a keyboard. And usually when you're building on top of some widget framework, it's assumed that there's kind of a single correct way to handle each input event. But it really doesn't necessarily work well on multi-touch interactions. And the reason why is that, say that you have a UI where I can, in this window, like swipe left and swipe right to move between images, or I can like draw an S to save it, something like that. Differentiating between the like first stroke of that S and the like go left gesture is not possible, basically. Like there's no good way to know which thing the person intended to do. So you either have to wait until they lift their finger back up to go ahead and do the left gesture, which starts to feel unresponsive and like sluggish, and you're getting out of your like 100 millisecond window, or you have to start doing it and then undo it as they come back the other way. And you'll see both of those implementations used in different programs. Like if you play around with iOS and Android apps, people have this problem in like real designs and have to just choose which of those two things they're going to do. And so basically recognizing different gesture types really complicates things when you have to wait to know what they're trying to do. And how to deal with that issue is still like an open research topic in HCI. People are still thinking about that on a day-to-day basis. Make sense? Enough? Yep.
The possible thing that you could do is, let's say you have like you gesture left or right, or like draw letters and stuff.
Mhm.
You make it so that you press a button that might bring up like a kind of a clear layout. Kind of like it makes it seem like there's a different layout on top, in which you do gestures and would only be gestures.
So what from our course would be an argument against that suggestion?
Oh, visibility.
Visibility would be one issue. What? What else? Yeah.
Modality?
Yeah, it sounds super modal to me, and it sounds complicated. Like you have to toggle in and out of like gesture mode. So some people do that sort of thing, but it sounds like you're just going to run into other problems down the road there. All right, a little bit on threading and asynchronous programming, and then we'll move into South by recap, and then we'll all go on spring break. It'll be fantastic. So why use multi-threading for UIs? One, I will tell you we do typically use multi-threading for UIs. And the reason we do that is that interactive programs need to respond quickly to user input. So direct manipulation kind of fundamentally assumes that objects on screen respond to the user's touch, the user's cursor, really actively engaged with whatever the user is doing with the thing. And so you get into trouble when whatever your event handler is, however it works, can't quickly complete the task at hand. So what are some examples of like places where your event handler may need to wait for a while? Yeah. Okay, so if there's something where there's like network access involved is one example. Yeah. Yeah.
Like wait procedures, just so basically like if there's like a Bluetooth scan occurring.
Okay, so if there's some like asynchronous big long thing happening in the background. Yep. Yeah.
Input output procedures, whether you're reading something off the disk or.
Okay, so if you're interacting with files or databases or something like stored somewhere, that's one. One last big one. Yeah.
Fetching data from somewhere.
Okay, so fetching data is one thing. One more. What's the classic one? Come on, computer sciencey kids. Classic one is you need to like go do some math. You've got like a bunch of computing to do, and maybe you're running a simulation of something, or you're, for whatever reason, you're doing something computationally intensive. For those things, you need to kind of decouple your code from the code that's doing the event handling and the screen updates. So that's the right answer fundamentally to that question on the midterm is like, why do we do asynchronous programming when we need to go fetch something from the network? It's that we want the app to be responsive while we're doing that. We want the user to be able to keep clicking next and back or flip between the Flickr image and the XKCD strip. It's not so much just about like waiting for one thing to finish before the next happens. Like you could do that in a blocking synchronous sort of way. It's really about like keeping the app responsive by moving work to another thread instead of locking up your UI thread. So here's an example of kind of what the bad side of that looks like on Android. Aw, tragic. So when you lock up your event thread on iOS or Android, that's how you end up getting force quit. And that's how you end up getting in trouble with Google or in trouble with Apple, and people get error reports on your thing and your thing gets pulled out of the App Store. So don't do that. It's bad. You want to never lock up that main thread, whatever is doing the main processing. So avoid that. And why did that happen? So recall that this is our event dispatch loop. What happened here was that right in here in the invoked callback method, you did something that took way too much time. And so your long-running operation stopped the event loop, and it wasn't sure what to do about that. And so how do you avoid this? Basically, you just spin off into another thread somewhere. Or in Canoma.js land, you send out an asynchronous call and say, I want to do this off of the event dispatch loop. I want to do it in the services thread, something like that. And so the asynchronous design in Canoma.js is that we have these messages and handlers, and we use that to interact with the world in an asynchronous way, where all message invocations get dispatched through the event loop. So things within one pass of a handler happen synchronously, but then as soon as you call another handler, that goes back onto the event dispatch thread, and then it shows back up when the system has time to actually deal with it. Cool? Everybody happy? Excited? Excited about engineering? Good, because I don't want to talk about it anymore. So, what all is going on in class? How you guys doing? How's pace right now? Is everybody feeling crunched? Okay. Are midterms happening right now? I decided it was less mean to put the midterm a week earlier than to put it right before spring break. And there are some people I know that put it right after spring break, and that seems horrible. That seems like a bad thing. Speaking of the midterm, congrats for making it through. Don't stress out if you didn't finish. Very few people finished. Some people did, but very few people really gave coherent responses to everything. It's fun as we get to the last few pages, so I've been grading it backwards because I want to leave for the GSIs, the hard questions. And so I took the extra credit questions, and I took the Belmont report questions and things like that. And definitely you were getting less reasonable as time went on. So that's exciting. I do not get angry about everything. That was not the correct answer for the very last question on the exam. What's that? Yeah, ethics in user studies was what we were looking for there. Everybody if you're in the room and you put fonts, who gives a shit about fonts? I know I don't care anything about font. That is not the correct answer. All right, what else is going on? So we'll try to get grades for those back near the end of spring break or after spring break, something like that. IPA 3 is out, due end of day on April 1st. I convinced the GSIs to push that back a couple of days because I didn't want to deal with it while I was at South by. But basically, you have to implement a pet feeder and a companion app for your pet feeder. I will write up some tutorials tonight. So the sort of quality of tutorial material you got for the previous two, I'll get to tonight. Sorry that it couldn't happen earlier, but I was in a booth all day, every day. In principle, you should have everything that you need to do this project, I think. It's all in the tech notes and the docs, but I'll give you a tutorial anyways. Be aware, if you haven't started yet, that this is a bigger project than IPA 1 or 2. It's intended to give you everything you need to know to do the interactive prototype. And so I want everybody in the class to be capable of that, even if you do break up the interactive prototyping work amongst your group in some other way. So the goal is that you'll be able to take a lot of the code that you wrote for this thing and just drag it directly over into your interactive prototype assignment. Questions on that? I know there's some incompatibility between the current version of Studio and the older tutorials, and I don't understand why, so I'll look into that today. It should just work. What else? Low fidelity test and iteration is due tomorrow. Is that going okay?
Yeah.
Are you enjoying user testing?
Yeah.
All right, raise your hand if you like really went out in the world and found somebody interesting to talk to. And raise your hand if you're terrible and just interviewed your roommate. Excellent. So I'll tell you, when I took this class, which I did, I took CS160 many years ago, we were doing a web project for middle school teachers was the idea. It was like a grades and attendance tracking. It was kind of courseware before courseware was a thing. And like we went out and we found like a middle school somewhere where we could just like go and talk to people and show them our UI designs and like interview them. I don't know if they thought it was a waste of their time, but they were happy to chat with us. So you really can just like call people and go out and talk to them. It's not that bad. Anyway, the goal here is to finish this up by tomorrow and then be looking down the road to the interactive prototype. So that's going to be due in today, April 6th, because on April 7th and April 9th, we'll be doing presentations right here in class. We'll have more information about that soon, but what you need to know for now is that you need to be here, the 7th and the 9th. Those will be mandatory because half the teams will go on one day and half the teams will go on the other, and we want everybody to see all the presentations and rate them and review them and all those sorts of things. So expect to be here. Yeah.
So I talked to Shayna and she said that the interactive prototype is more of static images that we have to make on but we have to make those interactive.
Interactive would seem to imply to me that there should be some interactivity there. I mean, it doesn't have to be the final thing, but we'll hash out exactly what that assignment looks like. But it will be like programming in Canova.js for sure.
We have to take care of the hardware.
Yeah. So no, I mean, nobody cares about the hardware side of it. We're not doing the hardware side of it.
Getting the data.
Uh-huh.
We have to like.
So if you've started IPA3, there's this thing in the Canova simulator where you have hardware pin simulators over on the left. And that's kind of what you're going to do for your final project is like on the device side of it, you'll have some static images here, whatever that is, that's totally up to you. And then over here will be, like, imagine that you were doing this pet feeder thing and you cared about like how much food was in the bowl. Imagine you had an imaginary sensor for that. You can just build a slider that simulates that input. And so you'll have like however many sensors your thing would need. And if your thing is more of an output heavy thing, like the people that are doing the interactive glass, for instance, maybe your thing would be more heavy on this side. And if your thing was more input driven, it would be more heavy on this side. But it's just kind of whatever you need to communicate the concept. You don't have to do a full implementation of the device thing, but then on the mobile side, you do. So that has to be a real thing. So that's the goal for this April 7th, April 9th, is to have enough of that done that you can present it in class and kind of talk coherently about it. Cool? All right, let's talk about South by for a minute. South by is weird. Austin is weird. If you've never been to South by Southwest, I do recommend it. It's like way more fun if you're just like attending than if you are like having to work the stupid thing. And it's always tragic because most years when I go, because I'm running the booth, I get a platinum pass, which like gets you into everything. And then instead of like going and enjoying all the bands, I come back and teach you people. So yeah, that's life. It's a lot of freaking work. But it's here's an example. If you go out in the world and you become a UX person and like you build products, you can end up having a whole booth where like you make a bunch of people like pitch your product. So these are Canoma team members out pitching Canoma Create sitting there. And if you're really lucky and you really hit it big, you'll get a giant version of your product made. So this is a like 80-pound, 10-foot by 10-foot giant Canoma Create that I was absolutely convinced was going to fall and crush me at some point because I thought that would be very symbolic. If I created Canoma Create and then it crushed me at some point. So anyway, I wandered around the showroom floor. I didn't make it very far out of the exhibit hall, so you don't get like pictures of Kanye, but you do. I have pictures of like a lot of the exhibits from the exhibit hall. And I'm going to try to spin a little bit of a narrative for you here about like interesting things I saw in South by Southwest. So the first theme, I would say there's probably 100 exhibitors, 150 exhibitors, something like that. Many of them are not interesting to us. They're like, I sell batteries for cell phones, sort of people. But some of them are interesting. And so the first kind of theme that I saw this year that has been building over the years, but was really prominent this year, was like UX outsourcing companies. So everybody's having so much trouble hiring UX people right now, like not just like designers, but like real UX people, that all these like UX outsourcing and consulting companies are cropping up, and they want to help you run your user studies, or they want to help you do whatever. Like basically every lecture we've had this semester, there was like a company there at South by 4 willing to sell you that service. A few examples of things like this. This nice young lady was pitching floor sensor analytics. I'd like activate the soul of your brand. Get it? Get it? Soul. Oh, they're funny. Anyway, so what would you guess this product is about? What might one use it for? Okay, why? Why do I care? Yeah, so it's kind of like brick and mortar eye tracking, basically. So this is a company that will come into your business and augment your floors and then give you a heat map of like where people walk in the store and when and why and how long they hover there. And the goal is, if you're Safeway or something, you buy $1 million worth of floor sensors, and then you can keep tracking where they're spending their time and try to convince them to spend more money. So that's kind of fun. Who's next? Has anybody ever seen these guys? You may have. If apparently they have a contract at Berkeley. I talked to them for a long time. So they have a contract with the Career Center at Berkeley, and they do like personality tests for students who go and like talk to the Career Center. But they also do like all these. I've seen their banners on different people's websites. The idea is that they build personas for you automatically by putting these yes or no questions in front of your users. So, do you like mountain climbing? Is that me or not me? And you click one of those two, and then you get another one, and like you can choose how many of these you do, but they're just like fun, and they sit up there in the corner. And the end result that's supposed to be spit out is a persona of not just you, but like personas for frequenters of this site. But apparently if you go to the Career Center, you can go and get like your canonical persona handed to you. So if anybody does that, let me know. I'm curious to know if it's even remotely interesting. But this is a good example of like UX being distributed out into the world because they couldn't find a UX designer to like sit there and tell you, what the personas are. And so instead you hire somebody else to tell you, what your personas are. Here's a company that just makes infographics. They had a sign, they had a card that literally says, "We make infographics." That was like the name of their company. So if you need infographics made, boy, do I have the people for you. But again, this is one of these like HCI info-busy things where like, there was a time when if you were really interested in infographics, you hired somebody that was interested in infographics. But now, instead, you could go and give all your data to somebody, and they'll kick back an infographic for you. So that's fun. Social media command and control was a big thing. I saw probably 10 different booths from companies in that space. One good example of it was these people who had the social command center. And the notion here was that you put in like a Twitter search term, and you're supposed to buy. So you're supposed to buy this thing from them, this big wall. And you're supposed to put this big wall like in your office, near like your marketing department. And you put in, CS160 or Canoma or whatever. And then you see on the thing like where people are tweeting about it and what they're saying, and top posts go by and the stream goes by. And you see related keywords and all these things like about your brand. And so it's for people that are like super worried about their brand and just want to keep like a really close eye on it. And what was really interesting was there were all these things that were like services that people were selling to help you automatically detect when a tweet was being perceived by the world as negative and like auto delete it or auto apologize for it. And so I saw this company, they wouldn't let me take a picture actually, which is maybe not great marketing, but they were literally like in the business of detecting racist tweets. and then like auto deleting them. So it's like when your social media 19-year-old intern tweets something horrible, like we'll auto delete it based on how quickly people respond in negative ways to it. And so this like monitoring and controlling your social media impact on the world was a big, big theme this year at South by. These things were cool. So these are 3D pens, which is kind of becoming a thing over the past couple of years if you've seen the 3Doodler or a couple of these other things. I think it's really neat though that we live in a world where like you have to make this specific of a claim. So it is the world's first 3D pen with cool ink. And like we've come somewhere place, right? Like when it's not cool enough to be like, we made a 3D pen. You can sit here and you can draw the Eiffel Tower. No, it's like we're the one with the cool ink. Doesn't burn you quite so badly. Yeah.
I was gonna say, are they referring to like the temperature of the ink?
They are, yeah. They're referring to the temperature of the no hot parts, no melting plastic, no unpleasant smell. Although they did have cool ink in the sense that it was glow in the dark, one of their things. So that was pretty neat. I did enjoy, they made me like a little glow in the dark Eiffel Tower. So that's neat. Getting into like a more CS160 realm, these guys sell customizable keyboards. And so, I apologize for all my crappy pictures. It wasn't super well lit in here, but this thing is called the Tricky keyboard. And it's these little modules you buy that have just like blank keys and blank module, and then you can snap them together in arbitrary configurations and then put whatever labels you want to on the keys and then bind them to whatever keystrokes you want. And so they were pitching most directly at gamers who like, you know, make your own specific keyboard for the game you like to play with your Tricky keyboard thing. I'm not sold. I don't know that I would buy one of these things, but they must be doing okay because they had to have dropped like 10 grand on their booth or something at least. So, you know, somebody apparently is buying these things. Yeah.
So it totally looks like a toy, but like in terms of clicking, how did it feel when you did a chance to press on it?
It was okay. Yeah, I mean, it felt credible as a keyboard, I would say. It wasn't the most beautiful thing in the world, but in terms of kind of the input haptics, it was believable. Here's a video of some crazy guys. Okay, so the idea there was that it was a user interface, and I didn't get a longer video of them, which is too bad, but it was a user interface that was all like Pac-Man based, like you know, hand shadow, like bite the thing to select based. And I think they did it, as you can see, they did it with a Kinect. But like it's like the easiest thing in the world to do, and yet they had some pretty compelling demos where like, you know, you're doing gestural selection, and you know where Kinect usually makes you do this like long tap hover thing, they did this like bite the thing you want to select gesture. I don't know how you build a company around that. Like, I don't know how you get from like bite the sushi to we're gonna be profitable in year 5, but it was neat. Like they were doing a neat thing there, so that was fun. What do you think these are? Yes, all right, they're wearable sensors, but why? Why would you wear them?
Connect them to your smartphone, wherever you are.
No. So you could do a game. Mina's on the right track here, yeah?
Is it like beacons for people who go like on extreme hiking or sports?
No, though I like that. That would be much more interesting than what it actually is. It's for motion cap, but it's like, so normally motion cap is done using cameras and like the little white balls. There's this whole world of people moving into wearable sensor meshes for doing motion capture instead. So you take like the one that is supposed to go on your forehead, and you like stick it on your forehead, and you put the ones on your arms, and then you can do motion capture applications directly using sensors. Kind of fancy. These guys had like the mother of all booths. Canoma's a big sponsor at South by Southwest, and usually we have the biggest booth. This year, these guys had a bigger booth than us, which is amazing.
wearable thinking device which will allow you to control almost anything. You just need to wear the ring and tap on the side to start your gesture. Ring captures and analyzes your gesture inside of it and sends the data to your smart devices. Vibration and LED notifies you of status updates and notifications. Each application has its own unique gesture mark, so when you want to use it, simply perform the designated action. Gesture marks can also be edited, making customization simple and easy. To control home appliances, simply sync ring to them using your smart devices. You can connect directly or by using the hub. When designing Ring, we had to start from scratch. We made numerous prototypes, and each time Ring got smaller, while its functionality improved. Capturing and analyzing the finger's movement was also a challenging task. In 2013, our gesture recognition technology was still in its early stages. However, by 2014, it has been nearly perfected and is even precise enough to detect letters. Now you can type text midair, anywhere, anytime. We also provide Ring font, making typing quick and easy. Another unique feature of Ring is its advanced payment solution gateway. When used with GPS or iPhone, Ring allows you to immediately make payment transactions, revolutionizing the way you shop. We will also open API so developers can make original applications and publish in the Ring Store. The Ring Store allows you to search for and install many applications. We've already tested and confirmed that Ring works with numerous hardware, smart devices, and web services.
Ring is a futuristic input device that we can control almost anything. I'm so proud to say that we are almost ready for the mass production. Thank you for your support. We hope to begin this new and exciting journey with you.
So, yes,
Did you get to try it?
I did.
How accurate is
It's okay. It's not quite that, but it's okay.
Do you feel like what's sorry?
Not a little, yeah, I was like, light. So my favorite thing about that video, more than anything else, is how incredibly similar to the introducing carrot video it is. If you remember the video about carrots from a while back. Like, I'm not sure who copied who. I think the carrot thing is older though, so. But like if you, I can't even deconstruct that video because there were like so many things that we talk about in this class in that video. I could give like a final exam just on that video. But you'll notice like so what things that the world has already been through that didn't work the first time is Ring doing. There's a few of them in there. Yeah.
Very obvious names.
Okay. Yes. Yes, they're in a 90s product naming mode. They could have at least called it the iRing, right? Yes. They have their own ring font. They've reinvented graffiti for some reason. That can't be good. Yep.
Your thumb and your index finger are always so close together that you can accidentally tap this thing and you're doing gestures all the time.
Yeah, so like it strikes me as like a modality nightmare where, and indeed, many wearables have this problem, like smartwatches have this problem too. But I could easily see like just texting random letters to your girlfriend all day. Like, ah! Yeah, what's the equivalent of butt dialing for just like I was doing my life and like things happened? It's interesting. There's some art project there, I'm sure, if you like tweet every time you move your hand or something. So Ring was interesting. They raised a bunch of freaking money on Kickstarter last year and are now going to be selling on Amazon apparently soon. I feel like I'm almost obliged to buy one just to report back to you guys and tell you how it works out in the real world. There's one other really fundamental assumption baked into this thing, though. Anybody catch what it is? Yeah.
So you want to wear a ring?
Okay, well, there's that. Yeah, so you better not have plans for that particular finger already. Anything else?
You have to get all these devices to
Yeah.
connect them.
Yeah, so it's like you can turn on your lights. No, you can't. Not unless you've got a Hue, right? And you can turn on and off your TV. If you have a smart TV. And so that it's one of these products that like the fundamental assumption is that you've got all this IoT stuff, right? You've got like the smart house and you've got the smart car and you've got the smartphone. And so we're getting into these like meta IoT products, these IoT products that really assume that all of these things are commonplace. It's not actually true yet. Like maybe it will be, maybe it won't be, but it's certainly not true today. I'm confident of that. All right, next in the wearable space, the Arky. These guys were really sincere, I will tell you that. They, more than anybody else I talked to, really wanted to talk to me about their product. Any guess what this thing does? So it's a wearable wristband. Yeah, so it corrects your posture. So it's supposed to, you alternate over the course of the day which wrist you wear it on, or like one day you wear it on your left wrist and one day you wear it on your right wrist. And then they tell you after a couple of days, like how your posture is and whether you're like leaning to one side or the other, based on analyzing like how your arms move over the course of the day. They said the big one. So what would you guess is the most common mistake people make with their posture? They claim, and that also conveniently happens to be very easy to detect using an Arky. Yeah.
Well, I was guessing fish maybe like having a hunchback or.
So that's a problem, but it's not apparently the canonical one. Apparently the thing that people do wrong is walking with a hand in their pocket. They said that screws up your back more than anything else. That was their claim. I can imagine how that would be very easy to detect using a accelerometer wristband thing though. Yeah. Oh, I doubt it. Now you sound like you're on Shark Tank. You're Mark Cuban on Shark Tank. Getting angry. They did not have it at hand. Let's put it that way. Perhaps if we go to Zicto's Arky website, we would learn more about the science behind this. But that was their claim. All right, Seesaw. What would you guess this thing is? And unfortunately, I couldn't find a video of it. I didn't take a video because I assumed there would be ones all over the web, but I could not find one. What would you guess this thing does? It does change color, but why? No. No, although I could see building an alarm clock out of these pieces. Yeah.
Maybe it's for showing you some sort of information. You set it up how you want to make something about glitter, something about the weather, and I'm guessing there's speed and color. Yeah, so basically it's for displaying linear information. And so what it does is the whole thing kind of rocks either left or right, and they can make the ball sit in one of these specific divots here. And you can associate a color with it. And so the idea is that you have it sitting on your desk or whatever, and you say you're the CEO of a company, you like tie it to your stock price. And like it rolls to the right when the stock is up that day and rolls to the left when the stock is down that day and changes color based on that. So here's their pitch. It's a display terminal as an interior ornament in your living room. It interacts with any information on the internet by tilting itself with a ball and lets you grasp the state of that information at a glance. So it's interesting. It's a cute design. I like it. I would buy one. I don't know why, but if I saw that for $100 on Kickstarter, I would buy it. I spent $200 on like the stupidest thing you've ever heard of on Kickstarter this past week. I bought a $200 1.5-inch cube of 95% pure titanium. And so it's a 1.5-inch cube and it's supposed to weigh 1 kilogram. So it's just a cube that is unusually heavy. So I'm very easy to convince on Kickstarter, is what I'm saying here. But I would totally buy one of these things. I mean, it wasn't cheap. It was $200.
What are people like? What are you gonna do with it?
Maybe it wasn't titanium. Maybe it was tungsten. It was something heavy, but maybe it was tungsten. That would be more common and less crazy priced. We'll go with that. That would make more sense. Whatever it was heavy. That's the point of the cube. Anyway, so this thing, fun. How many more of these do I have? A bunch. All right. What would you guess this thing does? So it's I'll tell you, the product is the bottle thing.
Is it like blood in the bottle?
No,
Looks like it's a water.
no,
Is it a light?
no. That would make way more sense.
Nice bottle for holding things.
Nope.
It's made of recyclable material.
For cooking things.
It is not for cooking things. No.
Like, you know, when you're supposed to drink water.
Nope. That would make way more sense.
It's an ecosystem.
Quit making good guesses. Think outside the box. Yeah.
Track your secret message? Is it
Ooh, you're close.
Message in the bottle?
Yeah. So the concept is that you open it up, you take off the cork, and you speak into it, and then you're supposed to put the cork back on, and then like mail it to your friend or mail it to your grandpa or whatever. And then when you take the cork back out, it plays the thing you just recorded. That's the whole concept.
Is it reusable?
How much are they charging for that?
I don't think they've gone to market yet. They were advertising some sort of crowdfunding thing. But yeah, so it's like, speak a message into the bottle and then send it somewhere.
I would offer more than like $10.
Yeah, I don't think it's $10. That's going to be my guess. But, this gets you, I mean, when I say that like there's all these connected devices being put on the market, like I'm not kidding. Like everybody is making up their own wacky, whatever their connected device thing is, story right now. So, you guys are not alone in venturing into this world with me. There's a lot of people doing a lot of really weird things. This apparently very popular in India is what I was told. Like that's where they're test marketing, and they're, it's more impressive if you like don't have a smartphone, was the gist of their pitch. Like you have one of these for your family and you can kind of pass it around and send stories to each other was plausible to me, but yeah.
I can see that maybe like they leave it in like maybe parts,
Uh-huh.
and they can leave it on different places. If we take a pour out, it will explain to you what this flower is.
Yeah, that would be much more fun than what they were actually pitching. I like that idea, but it is not what they were proposing.
Wait, but it can't replay it over and over, right?
I think it can, although it would be more fun if it didn't, right? Like, but I,
Snapchat, but like talking.
yeah, see, I think that would be more interesting. Man, all right, everybody in the room, we're gonna go found that right now. We'll literally just call it Snapchat, but with talking. And we're gonna make $1 million. Yeah, so I don't know. I think you could replay it. I think you could open it again and hear the message again, though it wasn't clear. Their prototype was not functional as far as I could tell. They just had videos. All right, who's next? Whatever this is.
Kakasi is a smart farm monitoring device that has been developed to monitor and record temperature, humidity, day length, and can record sap flow and soil conditions. It is entirely run by solar power. The device uploads data via Bluetooth connection to your smartphone when nearby, and then to the cloud for storage and easy accessibility. The Kakasi project enables consumers to understand what farmers are growing, so they're more informed about what they're buying. Using technology, we can now link food to the story behind it. You can actually see your food grow through the time-lapse footage as Kakasi records and distributes. The Kakasi app is a farm-to-table social network platform built specifically to grow the relationship between farmers and consumers. One-click action allows users to upload pictures of their meals and recipes, so farmers can see how their produce is being prepared. It not only reinforces our relationship with farmers, it's easy to reach out to other users. It's like a small town in your back pocket.
My name is Adam Smith, and I'm a director of the Kakasi Project. Our purpose is to support a world where food from sustainable, integrity-driven farms is sold. Kakasi is a new way to appreciate our food and where it comes from, and I hope you join us.
Please.
So I had a question about the last few products that you showed.
Uh-huh.
Do you think there is a market in the reviews, like the talking into the bottle and like this to like give you feedback or like shrink it?
Do I think there's a big market? No. Do I think it's possible that there is enough of a market to sustain a like two-person company? Maybe. It depends on kind of whether you manage to catch fire and find the little niche and like find the right person in the world. This one, I could see blowing up. I could see that being a big thing. I don't think it's likely, but I think that there's some small random chance that could be big. Or like some niche group of people in the world would be like, yeah, I really want to see like video of this carrot growing before I eat that carrot. It's a very specific want. I mean, so you'll note with most of these IoT products, like the need that we're filling is really thin, right? And so there's one argument to be made that like the big things are just already done. Like, we have word processing. Nobody can invent that again. And so instead we have to invent talking into the bottle and mailing it across the country. But maybe somebody cares about it. The bottle one, no, there's no company there. There will never be a company there. A couple of these could work. This thing I could see work. And interesting, the biggest reaction I had to this video actually, and it's interesting because it reminded me of some horrible things that you people said on your individual design 1 and 2, where several of you wrote things like, I was surprised to learn that 40-year-olds still have iPhones or still use technology. Or I thought that after a certain age, like 30, people didn't use technology anymore, things like that. But I was a little surprised when I saw the farmer with his iPhone there. He's like hanging out in his field and checking in his iPhone. I was like, that's not what farmers do. I was like, well, yeah, that probably is what farmers do. Like, of course, farmers have iPhones. Why wouldn't a farmer have an iPhone?
But how often do farmers go out and do that?
I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if like your smaller organic, field to table concerns do spend some time actually like wandering out in the fields. But
that's sustained their business.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously it would have to be a big value add for their customers in order to be practical. Yeah.
So the purpose of this device is to show their customers how their food was grown.
So I believe the point was twofold. It was to show your customers how their food was grown, and then just to like build some connection between like the farm and the local market, so that you could like then text back to the farmer and be like, I used that carrot right there to build this thing. You can imagine this going to like a creepy place really quickly, though, right? Where like you're like, I want that cow, and I want that cow to stand next to that carrot, and then I want them both here. It could get weird fast. Yeah.
If this catches on in the future, I can kind of like, this is pretty depressing, but I can picture like large scale commercial farms having like a small portion where they like dress it up really nicely,
Sure.
and then put this next to it, so you think your food is coming from this like
Sure.
picturesque small farm, whereas like next door is the actual.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we already have that in the like meat side of the industry. Without getting too deep into that, it's true. And I don't know what the horrors of the vegetable world are. I'm sure there are some though. But yeah, it's interesting. Do you want that much information ever? I don't know. I don't know if it's relevant. Anyway, staying on this like food thing, yeah.
So regarding word processing, like you mentioned that,
Uh-huh.
I was at the startup fair yesterday,
Uh-huh.
the company trying to reinvent spreadsheets.
Oh, good.
Do it differently.
Cool. So, you can take that spin, right? You can either improve, build a better mousetrap or build something totally new. Right now, we're in a kind of wave of people building things totally new, for better or for worse, and a lot of it is for worse. But, that's where we are right now. On the smaller scale side of the agriculture thing, these guys, this is just a soil moisture monitoring system. And these things you can print using just a regular printer. You just have to load it with like copper ink or something, some sort of capacitive conductive ink. And so you can print these things, and they said they can get the cost down to like a penny per sensor, basically. And so you print like 10,000 of these on your printer at your farm and just go stick them everywhere. And you can like do something visually, apparently, to like just go by the field and see how the water moisture levels are everywhere. So that could be interesting. That's kind of compelling. These small leaves could change the world. Very good. All right, this, not going to change the world.
the requirements of the
So I'm not even going to ask you to guess on that one, but basically what it was you took weights that represent how much money you have available for rent or to buy a home, and you put them on the left side, okay? And then you tell it what market you want to search in. And then on the right-hand side, you can put on like 2 bedrooms or like patio or things like that. And it will show you when you have like asked for too many things and the scale will tip over because you no longer can afford like the things that you want. And then when it's in balance, when you have like, you can get all those things at the amount of money that you wanted, it brings up search results for the area that you're searching in and shows you the houses that you can afford. So it's this like steampunk thing that if you were like a steampunk realtor, this would be awesome to have like in your office. I think the market is really limited outside of steampunk realtors though. Yeah.
It's like a lot of things, like especially this aren't meant as like we actually want to sell this particular thing, but like this is some cool stuff with digital technology,
Yes.
and it's like
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So a lot of these groups are design companies that want you to hire them to design something unrelated to the thing they're pitching in their booth. I think that's true of the Seesaw people also. There are a few of these actually where I think they're advertising themselves and they're using these things as examples. And to be fair, we do the same thing in the Canova booth. You know, we have like labyrinths and big puzzles and big interactive exhibits, but we don't sell big interactive exhibits. We sell a JavaScript framework, and so it is all about like getting people to stop and like talk to you and then try to build a business relationship from getting them to stop and talk to you. So there's that. I have 2 more. This one was so complicated that I'm not even going to be able to explain it to you, but it's a bento box. That part is easy enough. Also, the very, very pleasant young lady could only explain it to me in Japanese, and while my Japanese is okay, it's not good enough to get everything that she was telling me. So it's a bento box that when you are walking around on the streets, tells you when a friend is nearby, a friend who also has a bento box, if it happens to be near lunchtime, okay? So that's step 1. And then it lights up a corner of the bento box to tell you which way you should walk for the 2 of you to meet, okay? So that's step 2. Then you sit down and you start enjoying your lunch. And it has a microphone. And each bento box has a microphone. And it blinks to tell you if one of the 2 of you is dominating the conversation. So it blinks to say, like, you're talking too much. You should listen to your friend, sort of things. And then it also does something. It tells you whether you're eating too fast. I got that much. And so it blinks red if you're eating in one individual cup too fast. And it also gets mad if you don't, like, eat individual components. Like it wants you to spread your attention around instead of eating all of one thing and then all of the next thing. And then something, it gets mad if you don't refill it the next day. So that was like the world's most complicated bento box with the very nice Japanese lady. One last completely ridiculous thing. So this, you have a fruit stand or whatever, and when you pick up one of the onions, a speaker somewhere says, I was grown on January 17th, and tells you the story of the vegetable. So this is getting back to this like farm to table thing, but I asked like, all right, why would anyone? And they said, basically we want farmers to be able to like pitch their farm in like 10 seconds when you pick up a vegetable. And so it was all about like, it was detecting, I think, when the weight changed on the table and by how much it changed to know which item you had picked up. And then it would talk to you about your thing. So that is South by Southwest. If you go to South by Southwest, I'll give you one last photo. Make sure you don't get eaten by the Wolfram Alpha wolf. He was a constant scourge of the exhibit hall. So this is the sort of thing you run into. I ran into like I pitched Canoma Create to Sir Mix-a-Lot. That was fun. He came through the booth. Yeah, we had just like the most random people will come through your booth when you're hanging out at South by Southwest. So,
What exactly do you pitch to them? Do you want them to program in?
so apparently Sir Mix-a-Lot is a big Arduino person. Like Mix is all up in the Arduino space these days. And so he was like looking around at Arduino competitors to see what they were up to. The Wolf and I had just rapped about whether he was going to eat any of the other mascots. There's a company called Ghostry that has this like giant ghost mascot, and I really wanted him to go maul it. He wasn't quite into it. Anyway, so that's that. Enjoy spring break. Get your thing done for tomorrow. Don't put off IPA 3 to the last minute. I'll put up tutorials tonight. See you in a couple weeks, kids.
See a company called SwitchMate.
SwitchMate. What do they do?
They do the smart light switch, where it's like you can snap it right onto.
Oh, so I'm familiar with their